and welcome to another episode of the Looking After Nature podcast, bringing you closer to nature and wildlife in Hampshire. My name is Andy Davison. I'm here once again with my co-host and fellow ranger, Carly Harrod. Hi, Carly.
Hi, Andy. So today we're out and about and not sat at our computers recording, which is brilliant, isn't it?
Yeah, it's fantastic, isn't it? And it's the fact that we were hoping it wasn't going to rain. It's just spitting a bit, but it's lovely to be out. You'll probably be hearing a bird song behind us as we record as well, which would be really nice.
Hopefully, although it is starting to rain a little bit heavier.
But it's a lovely place we're at. We're at Abbotstone Down. There's big open areas of grass here, and hopefully we'll be looking around as we talk and seeing what we can find here.
So at the moment, we are stood in a field, but it's a very, very lumpy field. It looks slightly alien-like, and that's because there's hundreds of anthills. I can literally see hundreds of anthills, and that's a really good sign, isn't it, Andy?
Yeah, it is. It's probably a bit more diverse than your average field because there's loads of different plant species here.
So we're not here on our own, are we, Andy? We've got some guests with us today.
Yeah, we've got two guests today. We've got Nicky and we've also got Gemma, and we'll be talking to them later. So we're joined here today by Nicky Court. Hi, Nicky.
Hi, Andy. Thank you for having me out here. My first site visit of the year.
It's fantastic to be out, isn't it? It's nice to see you other than in an office or on a screen.
In front of a screen, yeah, that's where I've been most of the time.
So although you work for Hampshire County Council, you're not in the same department as us, are you? Can you tell us about your job?
Yeah, so I've been with the County Council quite a few years, more than I care to mention, but we're in the Economy, Transport and Environment Department. What used to be the old County Planning Department, actually. So I work with a whole bunch of what we call specialists, ecologists, archaeologists and environmental impact assessment people. So we deal mainly with County Council developments, new roads, schools, etc., and do all the advice for that. And we also advise a lot of the district councils as well on the impact of planning applications. So we're pretty busy. And I also, for my sins, manage the Hampshire Biodiversity Information Centre, which we established about 20 years ago. Fully partnership-led steering group. We like to think we're pretty independent from the county council. So a lot of our funding comes from all our partners. And yeah, that keeps us busy.
So you say you clearly work in partnership. That's with local authorities and wildlife trusts and people like that, isn't it?
We've got Hampshire's got 2 national parks, of course, which is quite unusual for a county. So we work with the national parks. We've got about 13 district councils, the unitaries, all the key species groups, the major species groups, because HBIC really is about data in and data out, and we sort of do the management bit in the middle. But it's about getting data in, and then it goes out to inform, all sorts of projects and schemes and developments, etc. And obviously working with the public as well and the local community groups, that's quite important as well.
So the data really you're talking about is about the plants and the animals and the habitats and all that right across Hampshire, isn't it? And the Isle of Wight? We
don't cover the Isle of Wight. They've got their own biological record centre, and we do work with them. We sort of work together as a southeast community, so we all support each other with best practice and joining forces when we need to update software and stuff, so we're not all completely reinventing the wheel. So a good relationship with all our surrounding record centres.
As we said, we're here at Abbotstone Down, but this isn't a site of special scientific interest. That's a difficult one to say, definitely. But it is very important for local biodiversity, isn't it?
Yes, and it's designated as a site of importance for nature conservation, which is the next tier down from a site of special scientific interest. But in fact, a lot of our sinks, as that's shortened to, support habitats of equivalent value to SSIs. It's just SSIs are just the best examples of in the county. So we've got a lot of very important sinks, but they're also, they are of county importance as well. So most of them will support a priority habitat or a notable species or species populations, assemblages and stuff. So we've got about 4,000 in the county now. We've been doing the evaluation of all the data to come up with the sinks for 25 years now. And we have, it's not just HBIC. HBIC evaluate the data but put it forward to a panel. So we've got Natural England, the Wildlife Trust and the County Council that all have to agree when we put forward new sites. But we also review sites because obviously some change or they get degraded or lost through planning. They're not meant to be, but so it's over a year we put about 100 sites to the panel for evaluation for agreement. So yeah, it's quite a slick process now.
So as you said, we're in well, Carly called it a field, but it's a lovely grassy area with these anthills. And it's called Abbotstone Down, but quite often I think of downland as massive big areas. Well, this is just a tiny little patch left here, isn't it?
Yeah, when you look on the old 1870s map, Abbotstone Down was huge. and it's slowly wooded up over time. So you've got these little relic patches left, and obviously the work that's been going on here for the past, well, I've been coming here for 20 years, you know, the clearing the scrub back, getting it back to being grazed is what's important. Chalk downland is such a rare habitat now, and they're all very isolated patches. So I know there's a few bits dotted about, but I mean, the nearest decent area of chalk downland now, I would say, would be at Winchester, Magdalen Hill Down. Between here and there, and that's 6 miles.
Yeah. We've
just got the odd little patch along a lane, or you know, glades in woodlands. There's a patch over in the woodland next to this site, and of course butterflies and that, they can't disperse more than 1 kilometre or so maximum for most species. So these small relic patches are extremely important in conserving what we've got, but also acting as refuges for hopefully the days when we can expand these sites, or, you know, start to put in stepping stones or corridors with other landowners, just because we need to enhance and increase their size.
And this is what we sometimes call fragmentation. It's the same
Yes.
with heathland and woodlands, where they get broken up over time, and the bits in between are poorer in diversity, aren't they?
Yeah, so we're seeing a real decline in a lot of species because they can't, they haven't got the habitat to support them any longer. They're just contained into these small sites. They can't disperse. And also with climate change, they're pushing their tolerance levels. So with hotter summers and more extreme events, they're finding it harder to cope on these small sites. So we've got to start doing what the government have said in their 25-year environment plan, which is about building bigger, better, more joined up, and managing better what we've got. So those are sort of the principles of what we're trying to do now that we're looking at our ecological network mapping, which HBIC have been developing, and it's being taken up by all the district councils. So an ecological network map is where we've identified all the core habitats that are still remaining. This is the national designations, the sinks, other bits of priority habitat. And then we're looking at what the opportunity is to expand those sites, make them bigger, join them up. And we're hoping this will happen through local authorities will be mandated soon to have biodiversity net gain as part of a planning application. So if you put in a planning application for housing development and you've only got a small amount of biodiversity on that site, you're expected to put 10% more back to get approval for your planning application, because it's not just about maintaining what we've got to increase. The government are really committed to this, increasing what we've got, because that's the only way you're going to slow the decline down. The decline will keep continuing otherwise with a lot of these species. And then the other thing, of course, is changing the way farmers manage their land. So rather than just being paid to do certain bits around the edges of fields and putting new bits of woodland, it's a whole scale change to the way they're going to look at their land, and they'll get paid more for doing biodiversity than they will probably for the basic payments they get anyway, the subsidies they get. So we're hoping that scheme will also be informed by our ecological network map, as it will show where are the best places to reconnect habitats, put in new wildlife corridors, put in new margins along fields, and hopefully build biodiversity back up.
Yes, the Countryside Service, I think he's been pretty successful in managing bits, our special sites, and we've got 80 across the county, and most of them, well, pretty much all of them have got some sort of designation.
Yeah.
But I think the future is getting the wildlife back out of these special places into the wider countryside, isn't it?
Yeah, getting it connected back up, because Abbotstone is a real example here of how isolated a real important piece of chalk downland is. We've got such tiny fragments around that we should now be looking at opportunities with landowners where we can create some sort of strips or connections, or even, if you look at the old map of Abbotstone Down, what was the common, there are all sorts of fields around this area which would be ideal for helping to connect up some of these important habitats.
And clearly working, as we said, is in partnership is the only way we can do it, because we can't take on all the land, and it's working with the landowners, the farmers, the other wildlife trusts and the other organisations to really get that back out, isn't it?
Yes. And also what we call farm clusters now are really taking hold in Hampshire, where you're getting groups of farmers taking sort of ownership, because it has to be at the landscape scale. They can't just do it, they've got to look across into their neighbours' land as well. So whole farm clusters are where farmers are getting together and facilitating with each other what they can do to join up their habitats.
So we talked about wildlife corridors and stepping stones, because I think some people, I remember having a conversation with somebody on a site once suggesting that we need to take it down a bit of wood to connect up to bits of heathland as a wildlife corridor, and they said he's got the path there, haven't they? But clearly wildlife don't think in the same way. So a wildlife corridor can be like a physical connection, like a strip of woodland or a hedgerow, can't it?
Yeah, hedge. Even a footpath, if it's wide enough and you've got nice edges, will act as a corridor. You know, some of our long distance footpaths I think are superb for connecting sites to each other. I mean, we've surveyed some of them. We know how good for habitats they are. So yeah, hedgerows, woodland strips, looking even at streamside planting as well to help bring connectivity along there if they're quite exposed.
But with stepping stones, it might be, for example, you've got a really flower-rich area here, but there might be another flower-rich over the top of the wood, you know, a few hundred metres away or a half a kilometre. But it's these distances, it's miles to them at the moment, it's the problem, isn't it?
Yeah, a lot of species can't even travel more than, you know, some species can't even travel more than a few centimetres or metres, but usually we're saying a kilometre is a minimum you'd need really for most species just to be able to hop over to. And of course it all depends on what the habitat is in between as well. You know, roads act as a barrier, you know, perhaps more green bridges is what we need. You know, you see on the continent some fantastic green bridges, but also, you know, some butterflies can't actually cross an arable field. Or a woodland might be in the way, but you've got to look at how you. But it's really down to, I think, the margins are what are important. The margins of hedgerows, the margins of fields. That's where you get all your insects. That's where you get all your biomass. And if you've got all the insects, then that'll bring in the birds. It'll create the suitable microclimates for butterflies to travel along. A lot of small mammals. So personally, I think it's a lot of it's about the hedgerow margins and the field margins. Not being so tidy, not being so neat, not spraying right up to the edge. And of course that will then help with things like, at the moment, a lot of our road verges, which, you know, it's a fantastic resource there for flowers if it wasn't for the fact that agricultural runoff comes straight down onto the verge from the farmer's field because he hasn't got a margin in. So, you know, that's destroying biodiversity on our road verges. As much as we want to try and cut them at the right time of year and stuff, they're just getting soaked in fertilisers. Because
that's the thing, they're pushed out to the margins. A lot of these fields, you know, these grassy fields that are still existing, they've been what is termed improved, but that's in agricultural terms. But improved, and they're normally just one or two species of ryegrass or they're
ryegrass and white clover.
And those flower-rich bits, you know, where there's red clover and scabious and all these other flowering plants are just squeezed to the road verges in a lot of places, aren't they?
Yeah, road verges are literally the relic bits of meadow that we used to have across the county. I think 95% of all meadows have been lost in the UK that we know of. So we're just talking about tiny patches. That, and there's a lot of good work being done where you can take the green hay off a meadow and transfer it over to a new site with some success. And Magdalen Hill Down, I know, which is outside Winchester, is a butterfly conservation reserve. That was arable 15 years ago. It's now been designated a sink because after 15 years it's developed all the right communities. It was reseeded correctly and it's now a brilliant piece of chalk downland habitat. So it can be done, we can restore. But preferably, I mean, that site is right next to an existing piece of grassland, which is what you want of downland. It's best if you restore all these habitats as close as you can to where there is already something similar to help with the colonisation.
So something like this, the fact, you know, you were talking about taking green hay across, and that takes the seeds across, which takes the plants. But the thing is, you can't take the insects really.
No.
You know, we've done the north end of this site. We've taken quite a few trees out to try and get the grassland back. And because I was doing some survey work last year where I found particular bees which are specialists on chalk grassland in this area. And actually I did go and look at the new clearance up there, and although that isn't chalk grassland yet, some of these bees were already up there. So they can find it if they have the opportunity, can't they?
Yeah, if they can move around, they'll look for the right conditions, and hopefully the plants and insects will marry up at some point.
So it's really been over the last sort of 30, 40, 50 years that a lot of these declines have come in, hasn't it? But I think there's a lot of opportunities now, and I think I'm feeling quite optimistic about improvement now because we've got some of these government things coming in, haven't we? Yeah,
I think so. With the DEFRA 25-year plan, it sets out very, very strong targets and commitments, not only on biodiversity but other things on pollution and waste and stuff. But you know, there's a commitment there to build back nature. So we've got, you know, we're developing nature recovery maps, planning applications requiring a net gain in biodiversity is going to be mandatory. You know, who'd have thought that 10 years ago, that you know, developers now have to put back more wildlife than was on the site originally. And that will help with you know, building in the green infrastructure, so people have got places, more green areas to go. It will help with the climate change agenda, because we're putting back more carbon basically, and it will help you know, all the benefits from biodiversity on air quality, you know, helping with flooding as well. You've got places, you know, you can create more wetland areas for flooding, so it's not just going straight out onto the roads and down into the rivers. So a lot of benefits to building more biodiversity back.
There's a lovely term called nature-based solutions, which I quite like.
Yes.
And it's the fact that, you know, because you've got these flower-rich places, you've got pollinators for the crop. And where you've got good vegetation next to rivers, it stops silt washing into the rivers. And all these trees and grasslands as well sequester carbon. So that's probably the thing to think about, the fact that nature delivers all these things.
Yeah.
So we have to improve that to try and make the place much better, don't we?
Absolutely, yeah.
Well, thanks, Nicky. It's been really good to see you on site, and it's really interesting, some of the stuff we're talking about here. And again, as we said, it's nice to see you when it's not on a screen or in an office and out actually in the field.
Yeah, thank you, Andy. It's been lovely seeing you too, having me out here, and yeah, it's exciting times, I hope.
So we are also joined today by Gemma, who works as a Community Engagement Ranger for the Rights of Way team. Hi Gemma.
Hi Carly, how are you?
I'm good, and it's so nice to be out in the sun. And
The sun's
it is
come out.
actually sunshiny now, we get to do our bit.
Woohoo!
And not raining. So what are rights of way then?
So rights of way literally mean the right to pass and repass. So we have different types of rights of way throughout the whole country actually, such as footpaths, bridleways, restricted byways and byways open to all traffic. Basically all of those allow different users to connect and enjoy to our countryside.
And rights of way are great for getting out and about and, as you say, enjoying the countryside. But they're also really good connectors for habitats, aren't they?
Yeah, absolutely. So on a lot of rights of way you'll find things like hedgerows. So hedgerows provide a really important link to fragmented or isolated pockets of environments such as woodland. Our rights of way team assists landowners and parishes in managing those hedgerows to ensure that our users of the rights of way can get to them safely. We manage the hedgerows though in a really mindful way, such as avoiding disturbance during bird nesting season. We also manage a large group of volunteers who act as path wardens, so they basically keep an eye on the vegetation growth because we just have such a large area to cover. So they're our eyes and ears, as it were, for the rights of way.
And how many miles of rights of way do we have in Hampshire?
So there are 2,800 miles of Hampshire's public rights of way, which is huge. And that network includes urban and rural paths, basically forms the backbone of the countryside access network.
So we have quite a few long distance routes as well, which are brilliant connectors. And we have some like the Wayfarers Walk, the Testway, and we also have the Hangers Way. Why are hedgerows so important to our rights of way network?
So on our rights of way, we have many hedgerows. Basically, these hedgerows are really important for species, including birds, insects and mammals for various reasons. And Nicky did touch on this earlier, but they act as wildlife corridors. So they're really important because animals can travel under the cover of a safe hedgerow to different feeding grounds or territories, not in the view of possible predators. So it's a safe place for them to access. Also, our hedgerows offer nesting sites and places for foraging and food sources. So you can see a lot of life just along a simple hedgerow.
And they're brilliant, aren't they? I love a good hedgerow. I think they're so pretty.
There's so much to see in there. If you just stop and listen and you're quiet for a few minutes, all the activity comes back. And I think that's really important actually to bear in mind when you are walking. Try and find a moment to stop and be quiet and just listen. And then all the animals start coming back to life because you've stayed quiet.
So we've been stood here for quite a while now and the birds are definitely starting to sing more. They're coming nearer to us.
Yeah, I've noticed a few robins prancing around because they're quite brave, aren't they, robins?
Yeah. And it's just beautiful, isn't it?
Absolutely. And I think it's really important that we consider urban rights of way as well as rural, because a lot of people think all the excitement happens on a rural rights of way, but actually there is a lot to see now in our towns and cities and certain urban rights of way, especially if you're by a canal, for example, by a water source. But equally, again, you know, you could get so many mammals now who are braving it in our urban territories, like foxes. You know, you do hear of people seeing foxes out and about on urban routes, so I think that's really important to bear in mind that not all the action happens out in the countryside, it also happens near where we live as well.
Definitely. I live right in the middle of Southampton. I do have a nice big hedge along my property because I live right next to the railway line. But that hedge is full of biodiversity. I've got hedgehogs that come in my garden. I've got all the birds, I've got stag beetles, and it's brilliant.
That's
and I
really
live
cool.
right in the middle of Southampton. So.
Yeah, I'm in Andover, and we have a hedgehog visit our garden quite frequently, and all sorts of birds. The other day I even had a greater spotted woodpecker on my bird feeder, which was pretty cool actually, first time I've spotted it. But I think it just proves the point that there's so much to see actually on our doorstep. Sometimes you don't have to get in your car and travel or go on a super long walk through the countryside. Sometimes we have it in our urban areas as well.
Yeah, definitely. Well, thank you so much for talking to us today, Gemma. I hope you've enjoyed coming out to Abbotstone.
Absolutely. First time here, I'll be back.
That's brilliant.
Thanks, Carly.
So, Andy, we're here at Abbotstone Down, and we said earlier we can see all these amazing lumpy things on the grass.
Yeah.
Now, what are they?
Anthills.
So, what sort of ants live in these anthills?
Well, let's have a look. We might. It's a bit cold, but sometimes if you poke the top, you sometimes get the ants coming out. But I think it's a little bit cold. They're right down in the bottom of the ground.
So, Andy, how are these mounds formed?
Well, it starts out because a queen ant will turn up and start a nest. So basically she'll go on the flat ground and then she'll start laying her eggs underneath. She'll be underneath the ground. She'll start laying her eggs and all the workers start hatching out from her eggs. And they slowly excavate underneath the ground and they bring up bits of little soil, because you can look in here, look, it's all like very, very fine, isn't it? They bring up little bits onto the top and slowly over time that forms the mound. Now these are, well, they're over a foot across and probably 8 inches tall, aren't they? So
some of them are even bigger.
Yeah, they look bigger, don't they? Yeah. So over time, that sort of loose soil forms the mound, and then you get all these plants on the top. And with it being really fine soil like that, it's really quite dry and warm on the top, which is why you can see there's different plants on the top sometimes as to down there.
And
So
I love looking at anthills because one of my favourite things to find is green woodpecker poo.
right.
And I like finding it because you can show it to kids. It's quite dry, and when you break it up, it is just full of little bits of ants.
Yeah, because they like eating ants,
Yeah.
don't they? You find them on your lawns quite often, and they're digging out the ants, and they pretty, well, not just ants, but it's a major bit of their diet is ants. Probably because ants give out formic acid, which is basically smells of vinegar. So they must like that on their food, vinegar on their food.
Like fish and chips?
Yes. So as I said, you do find different plants on the top. So on these ones we've got, they're not flowering yet, but these leaves I think are rock rose. But sometimes if you squash them a bit, you get these little leaves. No, it's not really, you get thyme, wild thyme on the top, which are really fragrant.
And it's not just ants and plants and green woodpeckers that like ant hills, is it? There are also many other species use them.
Yeah, it gets really complicated because I was out here last year recording a lot of insects. I was hoping to see some today, but it is far too cold, and actually it's a later year because we've had all these frosts, so it's delayed a lot of things. But there's a type of hoverfly called a yellow marked hoverfly, which is a specialist on anthills and chalk grassland, and it's thought that their young, their larvae, are inside the ant nests. But this is getting complicated. They're feeding on the aphids, like the green flies, that live on the roots inside the anthills, and the ants tend the aphids because they get honeydew from them.
Okay. So it's a very complex interplay of species, isn't it?
It is, yes, and also because you get the blue butterflies on here, you know, the common blues, but there's also, it's really weird, the brown argus, which is a blue, but it's brown. And the caterpillars of those who go into these nests, and it's where they form their chrysalis. The ants quite often take them in there because I think the chrysalis, the cocoon, smells like an ant. So they'll take them in and they'll spend the winter inside there, fully protected by all these ants, like in a fort, and then they'll come out and emerge in the spring.
I think they're amazing.
Yeah.
So coming into a field like this with this many anthills, it's a sign that this field has not been disturbed for a very long time, isn't it?
Well, that's it. Clearly, if you'd been ploughing this or cutting the grass over the top, you'd have destroyed all these anthills. So this is a sign that, I mean, probably it's taken decades to get this big. And we manage it by grazing. So the cattle that we use here will eat around and on the tops. But as long as we control the numbers, they won't destroy the anthill itself. Whereas if I took a big mower across this, it would wipe all this out.
It would. So, Andy, I don't have a fun fact for this month, do you?
In fact, I do, yes. There's a species of solitary bee on here called a red-tailed mason bee, which nests in old snail shells.
Okay.
So it finds an old snail shell tucked in the grass somewhere, and it makes its cells by chewing up bits of leaf. So it'll make a little cell in there with its egg on a load of pollen in there, and then they'll seal up the cell, and then they thatch it
With?
bits of grass.
Okay.
So they'll go searching all across here for little bits of grass, and they'll go flying back. Sometimes I've seen an 8-inch bit of grass being towed along by a bee, which is it's like a tiny bumblebee.
Yeah.
And they'll cover the entire snail shell in a thatch of bits of grass, so they can thatch their houses.
That's really cool. It's been great talking to Nicky and Gemma today, and we'd love to hear from you with any comments or thoughts, or if there's anything else you'd like us to discuss in a future episode. You can let us know through our social media pages. We are at Hampshire's Countryside Service.
And we'd really appreciate it if you'd rate and review our podcast on iTunes, as this helps other people find us.
And in the meantime, don't forget to check out our social media pages for relevant updates.
For now, thanks again for listening. I'm Andy Davidson.
And I'm Carly Howard. See you next time.